The audio file played through Mason Reed's earphones for the third time that morning, each replay cutting deeper than the last. His wife Sabrina's laughter echoed through the tinny speakers, followed by Cody Walsh's familiar voice, the same voice that had wished him luck at work just yesterday. "God, Mason is such a dull nobody," Sabrina's voice crackled through the recording. "I mean, what did I ever see in him? He comes home covered in grease, falls asleep watching TV, and thinks bringing me flowers from the gas station is romance." Cody's laughter joined hers. "At least he's consistent. Consistently boring. I still can't believe he hasn't figured out what we're doing. The man's about as sharp as a bowling ball. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even care if he knew," Sabrina continued. "He's so wrapped up in his little routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I'm dying here, Cody. I need someone who actually sees me." "I see you, baby. I see all of you." Mason's hands trembled as he pulled out the earphones. The anonymous flash drive had been sitting in his work locker when he'd arrived at the robotics plant that morning. No note attached. Just a simple USB stick that contained 47 minutes of recorded conversations between his wife and his best friend. The maintenance bay buzzed with activity around him, but Mason felt completely alone. Robotic arms moved in precise patterns along the assembly line, each motion calculated and purposeful, unlike his life, which now felt like a series of random, meaningless gestures. "Hey, Mason," Cody's voice called out from across the floor. "You look like someone ran over your dog. Everything okay?" Mason looked up to see Cody Walsh approaching, wearing his usual easy smile and oil-stained coveralls. At 34, Cody had the kind of natural charm that made people gravitate toward him. He was the guy who remembered everyone's birthday, who always had the best stories at the bar after work, who could talk his way out of any situation. He was also the man who had been sleeping with Mason's wife for the past 6 months. "Just tired," Mason managed, sliding the flash drive into his pocket. "Sabrina kept me up last night." Cody's grin widened. "I bet she did. You're a lucky man, Mason. Sabrina's something special." The words hit Mason like a punch to the gut, but he kept his expression neutral. "Yeah, she is. Speaking of which," Cody continued, checking his watch, "I promised I'd swing by your place after work to finish up that shelving project in the garage. You know how she gets when things aren't done right." Mason nodded slowly. The garage project had been his idea originally, built-in storage shelves to organize Sabrina's art supplies. But work had gotten busy, and he'd let it slide. When Cody had offered to help finish it, Mason had been grateful. His friend was handy with tools and seemed to enjoy spending time at their house. Now Mason understood why. "Actually, Cody, I was thinking about handling that myself tonight. I feel bad about letting you do all the work." "Don't be ridiculous," Cody waved him off. "I'm already halfway done, and I promised Sabrina I'd get it finished this week. You know how she gets when people don't follow through." Yes, Mason thought bitterly. He knew exactly how Sabrina got. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. Mason went through the motions, checking hydraulic systems, replacing worn belts, troubleshooting electrical issues. But his mind kept drifting back to the recording. How long had this been going on? How many times had he come home to find Cody at the house, helping with some project or another? How many times had Sabrina kissed him goodbye in the morning, then called her lover as soon as he left? At 5 o'clock, Mason clocked out and walked to his truck. Instead of heading home, he drove to Miller's Diner on the edge of town and sat in the parking lot, engine running, trying to figure out what to do next. He could confront them, walk into his house and demand answers. But what would that accomplish? Sabrina would deny everything, and Cody would put on his innocent act. They'd make him feel crazy, paranoid, like he was the one with the problem. Or he could pretend he never heard the recording. Go home, kiss his wife, shake hands with his friend, and live the rest of his life as the oblivious husband. The thought made him sick. Mason pulled out his phone and called Sabrina. "Hi, honey." Her voice was warm and familiar. "You're calling early. Everything okay?" "I'm not feeling well," he lied. "Think I might be coming down with something. I'm going to grab some soup and head home." "Oh, poor baby. I'll make you some tea when you get here. Cody's coming over to finish the garage shelves, but I can have him come back another time if you need to rest." "No, that's fine. I'll probably just go to bed early." "Okay, love you." "Love you too." Mason hung up and stared at his phone. How easily the lies came to both of them now. He drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown. The industrial city looked tired in the evening light, its brick buildings and steel bridges reflecting the gray sky. This was where he'd grown up, where he'd met Sabrina at a community college dance 15 years ago, where they'd bought their first house together. Everything familiar now felt foreign. The house was a modest two-story on Maple Street, with a small front yard and a detached garage. Mason had always been proud of it. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Now he sat in his truck across the street, watching Cody's red Chevrolet in the driveway. Through the garage window, he could see two figures moving around inside. Cody was measuring something against the wall while Sabrina handed him tools. They looked comfortable together, natural, like a couple. Mason's phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. "Cody's going to stay for dinner. I made your favorite. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Feel better soon." The casual way she mentioned it, like having another man over for dinner, was the most normal thing in the world. Mason wondered how many other dinners they'd shared while he was working late or out of town. He waited until 8 o'clock before going inside. Cody's truck was still in the driveway. "Mason," Sabrina greeted him at the door with a kiss on the cheek. "You look awful. Are you sure you're not running a fever?" "Just tired," he said, noticing how she was dressed. A blue blouse that showed off her figure, jeans that fit just right. She'd put on makeup too, subtle but noticeable. This wasn't how she usually looked when it was just the two of them at home. "Cody's in the kitchen," she said, leading him through the living room. "He got the shelves finished, and I insisted he stay for dinner. I made enough for an army." Mason found Cody at the kitchen table, already eating. He looked up and smiled, a piece of meatloaf on his fork. "There he is. How are you feeling, buddy?" "Been better," Mason said, taking a seat across from him. Sabrina brought him a plate and sat down beside Cody. The three of them ate in relative silence, with Cody occasionally commenting on the food or asking about Mason's day. "This is really good, Sabrina," Cody said, helping himself to seconds. "Mason's lucky to have someone who can cook like this." "I keep telling him that," Sabrina laughed, reaching over to squeeze Cody's arm. "He takes me for granted." Mason watched the casual intimacy between them. The way Sabrina touched Cody's arm, how Cody leaned slightly toward her when she spoke, the shared glances that lasted a beat too long. It was like watching a play where everyone knew their lines except him. "I should probably get going," Cody said eventually, checking his watch. "Early day tomorrow." "I'll walk you out," Sabrina said quickly. Mason stayed in the kitchen, listening to their voices drift in from the driveway. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was intimate, familiar. After a few minutes, he heard Cody's truck start up and drive away. Sabrina came back inside, already changing into her pajamas. "I'm exhausted," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I think I'll take a bath and go to bed early." "Sabrina." She paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Yes? Do you love me?" The question hung in the air between them. For a moment, Mason thought he saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But then she smiled. "Of course I do, Mason. What kind of question is that?" "Just wondering." She came back to him and kissed his forehead. "Get some rest, honey. You'll feel better in the morning." Mason sat alone in the kitchen for a long time after she went upstairs. He could hear the bath running, then the sound of her moving around in their bedroom. Eventually, the house grew quiet. He pulled out the flash drive and stared at it. 47 minutes of his life falling apart, compressed into a tiny piece of plastic and metal. He thought about deleting it, throwing it away, pretending it never existed. But he couldn't. The truth was out there now, recorded in digital permanence. The next morning, Mason woke up on the couch. Sabrina was already gone. She had an early meeting at the marketing firm where she worked. He found a note on the kitchen counter. "Feel better today. Love you. S." At work, everything felt different. Cody greeted him with the same friendly smile, asked about his health, made jokes about the weather. But Mason could hear the insincerity now, could see the subtle mockery behind the concern. During lunch break, Mason sat in his truck and listened to more of the recording. There were conversations he'd missed the first time. Sabrina complaining about their bed life, Cody talking about places he wanted to take her, both of them laughing about Mason's lack of ambition. "He's stuck," Sabrina's voice said. "He's been doing the same job for 8 years, living in the same house, following the same routine. I feel like I'm suffocating." "You deserve better," Cody replied. "You deserve someone who sees your potential, who wants to build something with you." "Sometimes I think about leaving him," Sabrina said quietly. "But then I feel guilty. He's not a bad person, just boring. And what would I do? I don't have anywhere to go." You could always stay with me, Cody suggested. I've got plenty of room. Mason turned off the recording and closed his eyes. They were planning his future without him, making decisions about his life like he was a piece of furniture to be moved around. That evening, Mason came home to find Sabrina in the kitchen making dinner. She was wearing one of his old t-shirts and had her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young, innocent, like the girl he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "How was your day?" she asked, stirring something on the stove. "Fine," he said, hanging up his jacket. "How was yours?" "Busy. We landed a new client today, a restaurant chain that wants to revamp their entire brand. Could mean a lot of overtime, but the money's good." Mason nodded, only half listening. He was studying her face, looking for signs of deception. But Sabrina had always been good at hiding her feelings. It was one of the things he'd initially found attractive about her. Her composure, her ability to stay calm under pressure. "Mason, are you okay? You've been acting strange lately." "Just tired," he said automatically. "You keep saying that. Maybe you should see a doctor." "Maybe I should." They ate dinner in front of the television, watching the news. The local weatherman was predicting rain for the weekend. A factory downtown was closing, laying off 200 workers. The city council was debating a new traffic light. Normal life continued around them while Mason's world crumbled. "I'm going to bed," Sabrina said around 9 o'clock. "I have another early meeting tomorrow." "I'll be up in a bit," Mason said, not looking away from the TV. She kissed the top of his head, a gesture that once would have made him smile but now felt like a lie, and went upstairs. Mason waited until he heard the shower running, then quietly went to the garage. The shelves Cody had built were impressive, solid wood, professionally installed, with custom brackets and hidden hardware. It was better work than Mason could have done himself, which somehow made it worse. Even his friend's betrayal was competently executed. Mason ran his hands along the smooth wood, imagining Cody and Sabrina working together, laughing, touching. The garage suddenly felt contaminated like a crime scene. He wanted to tear the shelves down, burn them, erase any evidence of Cody's presence in his life. Instead, he went back inside and climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Sabrina was already asleep, curled up on her side of the bed. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked peaceful, innocent. Mason stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of shared meals, shared dreams, shared struggles. They'd talked about having kids someday, about buying a bigger house, about traveling when they retired, all of it built on what he'd thought was a solid foundation of love and trust. But foundations could crack, and once they started cracking, the whole structure was compromised. Mason didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Sabrina's quiet breathing, replaying conversations and memories, looking for clues he'd missed. When had it started? How had he been so blind? The next day at work, Cody was unusually chatty. "Hey Mason, what are you doing this weekend?" he asked while they were working on a conveyor belt that had been making strange noises. "Nothing much. Why?" "I was thinking about driving up to the lake, maybe do some fishing. You want to come along? It's supposed to be nice weather." Mason looked at him, really looked at him. Cody had brown hair that he kept just a little too long, green eyes, and an easy smile that had charmed teachers, bosses, and apparently wives for years. He was the kind of guy who made friends effortlessly, who always seemed to land on his feet, no matter what happened. "I don't think so," Mason said. "Sabrina and I have plans." "What kind of plans?" "Private plans." Cody raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay between you two?" "Why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know. You just seem tense lately, like something's bothering you." Mason turned back to the conveyor belt, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. "I'm fine." "You sure? You know you can talk to me, right? We're friends." "Friends?" The word felt like acid in Mason's mouth. "I know." "Good, because I care about you, Mason. You and Sabrina both. You guys are like family to me." Family. Mason almost laughed. He wondered if Cody had practiced that line, if he'd worked on the perfect tone of sincerity. "I appreciate that," Mason said, his voice steady. "Any time, buddy. That's what friends are for." That weekend, Mason told Sabrina he was going fishing with some guys from work. Instead, he drove to the state park outside town and hiked the trails, trying to clear his head. The autumn leaves were turning, painting the forest in shades of gold and red. It was beautiful. peaceful, the kind of place where he and Sabrina used to go when they were dating. He found a quiet spot by the river and sat on a fallen log, watching the water flow over the rocks. The sound was hypnotic, almost meditative. For a few hours, he let himself imagine what it would be like to just walk away from everything: his job, his house, his marriage, his life. He could start over somewhere else, become someone new. But running away wasn't really an option. Mason had never been a quitter. When he committed to something, he saw it through. The question was, what was he committed to now? On Monday morning, Mason found another flash drive in his locker. This one contained video files, grainy footage from what looked like a security camera. Mason recognized the location immediately: the parking garage where Sabrina worked. The timestamps showed various dates over the past month. He watched his wife meet Cody in the shadows between cars, watched them kiss and talk and laugh. He watched Cody follow her to her car, watched them drive away together. He watched his marriage die in real time, frame by frame. The anonymous messenger was being thorough. Mason wondered who it was: someone from Sabrina's office maybe, or a neighbor who'd seen too much. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he now had evidence, not just audio recordings that could be dismissed or explained away, but visual proof of the affair. Mason copied the files to his phone and returned the flash drive to his locker. He spent the rest of the day in a strange state of calm, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The uncertainty was over. He knew exactly where he stood. That evening, he came home to find Sabrina cooking dinner again. She was humming softly to herself, moving around the kitchen with easy grace. She looked happy, content, like someone who'd found what she was looking for. "How was your day?" she asked, the same question she asked every night. "Enlightening," Mason said. She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I learned some things about myself, about what I'm capable of." "That's good," she said, though she sounded uncertain. "Self-reflection is important." "Yes, it is." They ate dinner in relative silence. Mason found himself studying his wife's face, memorizing the way she looked when she thought no one was watching. He noticed things he'd never paid attention to before: the small scar on her chin from a childhood accident, the way she chewed her lower lip when she was thinking, the pattern of freckles across her nose. After dinner, Sabrina went to take a bath. Mason waited until he heard the water running, then went to her purse and found her phone. He scrolled through the text messages, finding dozens of conversations with Cody. Most were innocuous: work schedules, grocery lists, plans for weekend activities, but others were more intimate, filled with inside jokes and pet names and promises to meet. Mason memorized Cody's number, then put the phone back where he'd found it. He was learning to be careful, methodical. If he was going to do this, he needed to do it right. The next morning, Mason called in sick to work. Instead of going to the plant, he drove to the public library and used one of their computers to research phone recording apps. He found several options, including one that could be activated remotely. Within an hour, he created a fake email account and purchased the software. Installing it on Cody's phone would be the tricky part. Mason knew his friend's habits. Cody always left his phone on the workbench when he was working on equipment, always forgot to lock it, always trusted people too much. It would just be a matter of finding the right moment. That afternoon, Mason returned to work, telling everyone he was feeling much better. He found Cody in the maintenance bay, working on a hydraulic press that had been giving them trouble. "Hey, there you are," Cody said, looking up from the machinery. "Feeling better?" "Much, thanks." "Good. I was starting to worry about you. You've been acting strange lately." Mason shrugged. "Just working through some stuff." "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." Cody nodded. "Fair enough. But if you change your mind, you know where to find me." Mason watched him work, noting the easy confidence in his movements, the way he hummed under his breath, the casual way he left his phone sitting on the workbench. It would be so easy to walk over there, pick up the phone, install the app, and put it back. Cody would never know. But Mason waited. He'd learned patience over the years, the value of taking time to do things right. When the moment came, he'd be ready. That evening, Sabrina announced she would be working late for the next few days. "Big project," she explained. "The restaurant chain wants to fast-track their rebrand, so we're pulling some long hours." "How late?" Mason asked. "Probably until 9 or 10, maybe later. You'll have to fend for yourself for dinner." Mason nodded. "I'll manage." "I'm sorry, honey. I know it's not ideal, but the money's too good to pass up." "I understand." She kissed his cheek and gathered her things. "I'll try not to wake you when I come home." Don't worry about it. Mason waited until her car disappeared down the street, then went to his truck and followed her. He stayed far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to see where she was going. She didn't go to her office. Instead, she drove to a restaurant on the other side of town, a quiet place with dim lighting and private booths. Mason parked across the street and watched her go inside. Cody's red Chevrolet was already in the parking lot. Mason sat in his truck for 2 hours watching the restaurant. He saw other couples come and go, families celebrating birthdays, friends catching up over drinks. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that they were part of the background scenery in someone else's betrayal. At 9:30, Sabrina and Cody emerged from the restaurant. They stood beside Cody's truck, talking and laughing. Then Cody pulled her close and kissed her, not a friendly peck, but a long, passionate kiss that spoke of intimacy and desire. Mason watched his wife melt into another man's arms. He watched her run her fingers through Cody's hair, watched her press her body against his. He watched 15 years of marriage reduced to a lie. After they separated, Sabrina got in her car and drove home. Mason waited until Cody left, then followed at a distance. He wanted to ram his truck into Cody's, wanted to drag him from the wreckage and knock him senseless. But he didn't. Instead, he took deep breaths and focused on the bigger picture. Revenge wasn't just about anger. It was about justice, about restoring balance to a world that had been knocked off its axis. And justice required patience, planning, and precision. Mason drove home slowly, letting Sabrina get there first. When he arrived, she was already in her pajamas, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. "How was work?" he asked. "Exhausting," she said without looking up. "How was your evening?" "Quiet. I made some spaghetti, watched some TV, nothing exciting." "That's nice." Mason sat down beside her. "Sabrina, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Are you happy?" She looked at him then, her expression carefully neutral. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy with your life? With us? With me?" She was quiet for a long moment. "That's a big question, Mason." "I know, but I'd like an honest answer." "I'm content," she said finally. "We have a good life, a comfortable life." "Content isn't the same as happy." "No, it's not," Mason nodded. "I thought so." "What about you?" she asked. "Are you happy?" "I was," he said. I thought I was." "But not anymore?" "Not anymore." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Mason wondered if this was their last honest conversation, if they'd ever be able to talk to each other without lies getting in the way. "I think I'll go to bed," Sabrina said eventually. "I'll be up in a bit." She kissed his forehead, that same gesture that had become so empty, and went upstairs. Mason stayed on the couch, staring at the blank television screen, planning his next move. The following day, Mason's opportunity came during the lunch break. Cody had gone to the bathroom, leaving his phone on the workbench. Mason looked around to make sure no one was watching, then quickly picked up the device. The phone wasn't locked. Mason navigated to the App Store, found the recording software he'd researched, and downloaded it. The installation took less than 2 minutes. He configured the settings to record all phone calls and saved them to a cloud server he'd set up, then deleted the app from the visible home screen and buried it in a folder of other utilities. By the time Cody returned, Mason was back at his workstation, acting like nothing had happened. "You look productive," Cody said, picking up his phone to check for messages. "Just trying to earn my keep," Mason replied. "That's the spirit. Hey, you want to grab a beer after work? I feel like we haven't hung out in a while." Mason considered it. "Sure. Where did you have in mind?" "Murphy's? They've got that new IPA on tap." "Sounds good." Murphy's was a working-class bar near the plant, the kind of place where conversations were loud and honest. Mason and Cody had been regulars there for years, celebrating promotions, commiserating over broken equipment, and solving the world's problems over cheap beer. They found a corner booth and ordered drinks. For a while, they talked about work, sports, the weather, safe topics that didn't require much thought. But as the beer flowed, the conversation became more personal. "Can I ask you something?" Cody said, leaning forward. "What's going on with you and Sabrina?" Mason took a long sip of his beer. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you guys seem distant lately, like you're going through the motions. All marriages go through rough patches." "Yeah, but this feels different. She seems unhappy." "She told you that?" Cody shrugged. "We talk sometimes. When I'm working on projects at your house, she mentioned that you guys have been having problems. Mason felt his jaw tighten. What kind of problems? I don't know, man. Communication stuff. She feels like you don't really see her anymore, like you're both just existing in the same space without really connecting. And what did you tell her? I told her that marriage is hard work, that every couple goes through difficult times. I told her she should talk to you about it. Mason nodded slowly. That's good advice. I care about both of you, Cody continued. You're my best friend, and Sabrina's, well, she's family. I want you guys to work things out. I'm sure you do. Something in Mason's tone made Cody pause. Are you okay? You sound angry. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've been acting weird for weeks. What's going on? Mason stared at his friend across the table. Cody looked genuinely concerned, his green eyes full of what appeared to be sincere worry. If Mason didn't know better, he'd think Cody actually cared about him. I'm just tired, Mason said finally. Work's been stressful, and you're right about Sabrina and me. We're going through a rough patch. Have you thought about counseling? Yeah, maybe. It might help. Sometimes an outside perspective can make all the difference. Mason almost laughed. An outside perspective, like the perspective of a friend who was sleeping with your wife. I'll think about it, he said. They finished their beers and parted ways in the parking lot. Mason watched Cody drive away, then sat in his truck for a few minutes, letting the anger wash over him. The man was good. Mason had to give him that. Cody had perfected the art of concern, of appearing to care while systematically destroying someone's life. But Mason was learning to be patient. He was learning to plan. And most importantly, he was learning not to underestimate his opponents. That night, Mason accessed the cloud server where Cody's phone calls were being recorded. There were several files already uploaded: conversations with coworkers, a call to his landlord, a discussion with his mother about Thanksgiving plans, and a 20-minute conversation with Sabrina. Mason downloaded the file and listened to it through headphones. Most of it was mundane: plans for the weekend, complaints about work, discussion of some television show they'd both watched. But toward the end, the conversation became more intimate. I wish we could just be together, Sabrina said. I'm tired of sneaking around. I know, Cody replied, but we have to be careful. Mason's starting to get suspicious. What makes you think that? Little things. The way he looks at me, the questions he asks. He's not stupid, Sabrina. He's going to figure it out eventually. So what do? We wait. Let him come to his own conclusions about the marriage. When he's ready to admit it's over, we'll be there to pick up the pieces. And if he doesn't, then we'll have to make some hard choices. Mason listened to the recording 3 times, memorizing every word, every inflection. They were talking about him like he was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be overcome. They were planning his future without him, making decisions about his life like he didn't matter. But Mason mattered. He mattered more than they knew. Over the next week, Mason collected more evidence: phone recordings, text messages, photos from the security camera in Sabrina's office parking garage. He built a comprehensive file documenting the affair, organizing it chronologically, creating a timeline of betrayal. He also began researching his targets. Cody lived in a rented apartment on the south side of town, drove a truck that was financed through the local credit union, and had a moderate amount of credit card debt. He was dating other women besides Sabrina. Mason discovered this through social media posts and additional phone recordings, and had a history of job hopping when things got complicated. Sabrina was more complex. She'd been promoted twice in the past year at her marketing firm, largely due to her relationship with her boss, Jason Crow. Mason had met Jason a few times at company parties, a smooth-talking man in his mid-40s who wore expensive suits and drove a BMW. According to the recordings, Jason was aware of Sabrina's affair with Cody and had even encouraged it, seeing it as a way to keep his star employee happy and motivated. The web of deception was larger than Mason had initially realized. It wasn't just about his wife and his friend. It was about a whole network of people who had decided his feelings didn't matter. But Mason was about to show them how wrong they were. The plan began to take shape in his mind. It would be elegant, precise, and completely devastating. He would dismantle their lives the same way they had dismantled his, carefully, methodically, and with absolute conviction. First, he needed to disappear. Mason had been squirreling away money for months. taking cash from his paychecks and hiding it in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. He'd also been researching temporary housing options, looking for a place where he could lay low while he executed his plan. He found what he was looking for in an abandoned auto repair shop on the outskirts of the city. The building had been empty for 2 years, but the electricity was still connected, and the basic infrastructure was intact. Mason made arrangements with the property owner, an elderly man who just wanted someone to keep an eye on the place, and moved in over the course of several nights. The shop became his base of operations. He set up a small living area in the back office, installed better lighting, and organized his surveillance equipment. He felt like a monk in a monastery, stripped of all distractions, focused entirely on his mission. Next, he needed to quit his job without arousing suspicion. Mason had been planning this for weeks. He would claim to be having a breakdown, overwhelmed by depression and anxiety. He would take medical leave, then eventually resign, citing his need to focus on his mental health. It was a story that would generate sympathy rather than suspicion, and it would explain his subsequent disappearance from social circles. On a Monday morning in late October, Mason called in sick to work. He spent the day visiting doctors, establishing a paper trail of mental health consultations. He described symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress-related insomnia. The doctors were sympathetic and professional, prescribing medication and recommending therapy. By the end of the week, Mason had all the documentation he needed. He submitted his medical leave paperwork to Human Resources, citing severe depression and recommending indefinite time off. His supervisor, a kind woman named Patricia, called to express her concern and offer support. "Take all the time you need," she said. "Your health is more important than any job." Mason thanked her and hung up, feeling a strange mix of guilt and satisfaction. Patricia genuinely cared about him, unlike some people in his life. The hardest part was dealing with Sabrina. She was genuinely worried about his sudden decline, and Mason found himself almost believing her concern was real. But he'd learned not to trust his instincts when it came to his wife. "I think you should see someone," she said one evening, sitting beside him on the couch. "A therapist, I mean. This depression, it's not like you, Mason." "I know," he said. "I'm thinking about it. I could help you find someone. Jason knows some good people." "No," Mason said quickly. "I'll handle it myself." Sabrina looked hurt. "I'm just trying to help." "I know, I appreciate it, but I need to do this my way." She nodded, though she looked unconvinced. "Okay, but promise me you'll get help." "I promise." It wasn't entirely a lie. Mason was getting help, just not the kind Sabrina had in mind. 2 weeks into his medical leave, Mason began phase 2 of his plan. He started following Cody and Sabrina, learning their routines, documenting their meetings. He discovered they had expanded their affair beyond stolen moments and secret dinners. They were spending entire evenings together at Cody's apartment, with Sabrina telling Mason she was working late or attending work functions. The recordings from Cody's phone provided additional insight into their relationship. They talked about the future, vacations they wanted to take together, places they wanted to live, dreams they wanted to pursue. They also talked about Mason, usually with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "He's getting worse," Sabrina said during one recorded conversation. "The depression is making him paranoid. Yesterday he asked me if I was having an affair." "What did you tell him?" "I told him he was being ridiculous, that his mental state was making him imagine things. I think he believed me, but I'm worried he's going to start asking more questions." "Maybe it's time to be honest with him," Cody suggested. "Tell him the marriage is over, that you want a divorce. It might be kinder in the long run." "I can't do that while he's in this state. He's fragile, Cody. A divorce could push him over the edge. So what do? We wait. Let him get stable, get some help, and then we'll figure out the best way to handle this." Mason listened to this conversation while sitting in his truck outside Cody's apartment building. His wife was inside, probably lying without clothes in another man's bed, discussing his mental health like he was a problem patient they needed to manage. The fury that washed over him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was pure, clean, and absolutely focused. Mason had found his motivation. He began developing specific tactics for each target. Cody would be the easiest. His life was relatively simple, with clear vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Sabrina would be more challenging, but Mason knew her better than anyone. Jason would require more research, but early surveillance suggested he had secrets that could be turned against him. Mason also reached out to old contacts from his pre-marriage life. He called Tommy Brennan, who had been his boxing trainer during his amateur days. Tommy was retired now, living in a small apartment above an old gym downtown, but he was happy to hear from his former student. "Mason Reed," Tommy said when he answered the phone. Haven't heard from you in years. How have you been? I've been better, Tommy. I was wondering if I could come by the gym sometime. I need to get back in shape. Doors always open, kid. You remember where to find me. I remember. Good. Come by tomorrow morning. We'll see what 15 years of married life has done to your conditioning. Mason also contacted Danny Morrison, an old friend from his construction days who now ran his own contracting business. Danny had always been good with electronics and had a flexible relationship with legal boundaries. Mason, you old dog, Danny said when they met for coffee. What brings you to my side of town? I need some help with a project, Mason said. Something unofficial. Danny raised an eyebrow. What kind of project? The kind where you don't ask too many questions, and I pay you well for your time. I'm listening. Mason outlined what he needed. Surveillance equipment, recording devices, some specialized electronics work. Nothing illegal, he emphasized, just tools for gathering information. This have anything to do with your wife? Danny asked. Mason's surprise must have shown on his face because Danny chuckled. I've been married 3 times, buddy. I recognize the signs. Someone's been stepping out on you? Something like that. Well, hell, you should have said so from the beginning. I've got a whole catalog of divorce-related services. When do you need this stuff? Soon. Give me a week. I'll set you up with everything you need to catch a cheater. Within days, Mason had access to professional-grade surveillance equipment. Danny had provided him with tiny cameras, long-range microphones, GPS trackers, and signal interceptors. Mason felt like a spy, though his mission was far more personal than international espionage. He began placing cameras in strategic locations: Cody's apartment building, the restaurant where he and Sabrina met, the parking garage at Sabrina's office. The footage would provide additional evidence, but more importantly, it would give Mason insight into their behavior when they thought they were unobserved. What he saw disgusted him. Cody and Sabrina weren't just having an affair, they were building a relationship. They held hands, shared inside jokes, looked at each other the way Mason remembered looking at Sabrina when they were young and in love. They were stealing not just physical intimacy, but emotional connection, the foundation of what marriage was supposed to be. Mason also discovered that their relationship had become semi-public within certain circles. Several of Sabrina's co-workers knew about the affair, and a few had even covered for her when she needed alibis. Jason Crow was actively facilitating the relationship, allowing Sabrina to use company time and resources for personal activities. The betrayal was systemic, institutional. It wasn't just 2 people making bad choices. It was a conspiracy involving multiple parties who had decided that Mason's feelings were irrelevant. But Mason was about to become very relevant indeed. Phase 3 of his plan involved establishing new identities and resources. Mason opened bank accounts under slightly modified versions of his name, obtained a post office box in a neighboring town, and acquired prepaid cell phones and email accounts. He was creating a shadow infrastructure that would allow him to operate without detection. He also began his physical transformation. Tommy put him through brutal training sessions at the old gym, rebuilding muscle mass that had softened over years of sedentary marriage. Mason had always been strong. His job required physical fitness, but now he was becoming something more dangerous. He was becoming focused. You're training like a man with a purpose, Tommy observed one morning as Mason hammered the heavy bag. I am. Want to talk about it? Not really. Tommy nodded. Fair enough. But whatever's eating at you, make sure you don't let it eat you back. I'll be careful. See that you are. I've seen too many good men destroy themselves trying to get even with the world. Mason appreciated the concern, but he wasn't trying to get even with the world. He was trying to restore balance to his own small corner of it. The physical training was complemented by mental preparation. Mason read books on psychology, strategy, and human behavior. He studied successful revenge narratives, both fictional and real, looking for patterns and principles he could apply to his own situation. He learned that effective revenge required 3 elements: patience, precision, and emotional detachment. The target had to suffer consequences that were proportional to their actions, but the retribution had to appear natural, inevitable, rather than orchestrated. The best revenge was the kind that looked like karma. Mason also established communication with his anonymous source, the person who had been providing him with evidence of the affair. Through careful inquiry, he determined that it was Linda Hayes, a secretary at Sabrina's office, who had been passed over for promotion in favor of women who had closer relationships with Jason Crow. Linda was motivated by her own sense of injustice, and she proved to be a valuable ally. She had access to Sabrina's calendar, email system, and office communications. More importantly, she understood the office politics and could predict how certain actions would ripple through the company. Jason's got a board meeting next month, Linda told Mason during a brief phone conversation. Big presentation about the company's direction. If certain information came to light before then, it could be very embarrassing for him. What kind of information? Let's just say Jason's relationship with his employees isn't always strictly professional, and his expense account has some questionable entries. Mason thanked Linda and added this intelligence to his growing file. Jason's downfall would be part of the larger plan, but it needed to be timed carefully for maximum impact. As November turned to December, Mason felt ready to begin active operations. He had spent 2 months gathering intelligence, building resources, and preparing for what was to come. Now it was time to start applying pressure. The first target was Cody's professional life. Mason had learned that Cody was interviewing for a promotion to shift supervisor, a position that would come with better pay, benefits, and prestige. The interview was scheduled for a Friday morning, and Cody had been preparing for weeks. On Thursday night, Mason put his plan into action. Using one of his prepaid phones, he called Cody's apartment and left a message claiming to be from the plant's emergency response team. There had been a chemical spill in the maintenance bay, the message explained, and all maintenance staff needed to report immediately for safety briefings and cleanup duties. The message was convincing because Mason understood how these situations actually worked. He used the right terminology, referenced real procedures, and provided contact information that would route to a voicemail system he had set up. Cody received the message when he returned from dinner with Sabrina. Mason watched from across the street as Cody's apartment lights went on, saw him moving around frantically, presumably gathering his work gear. 20 minutes later, Cody left his apartment and drove toward the plant. Mason followed at a distance, watching as his former friend pulled into the employee parking lot and walked toward the main entrance. The plant was closed for the night. Security was minimal, just one guard who wouldn't be expecting anyone to show up for a phantom emergency. Cody would spend at least an hour trying to get inside, calling supervisors, attempting to verify the emergency call. By the time he figured out it was a hoax, he would be exhausted, frustrated, and unprepared for his interview the next morning. But Mason wasn't done. While Cody was dealing with the fake emergency, Mason was at Cody's apartment, using the spare key he'd observed Cody hiding under a fake rock near the entrance. Mason moved quickly and efficiently through the apartment. He wasn't there to steal or vandalize. He was there to gather intelligence and plant evidence. He photographed important documents, copied computer files to a flash drive, and installed additional surveillance equipment. Most importantly, he planted cocaine in Cody's bedroom, a small amount hidden in a prescription bottle that would be discovered if anyone conducted a thorough search. Mason had purchased the pills from a dealer Danny Morrison had connected him with. It was a risk, but a calculated one. The cocaine wouldn't be discovered unless Cody got into serious legal trouble, and it would serve as insurance against any potential retaliation. The next morning, Cody arrived at his interview looking tired and rattled. Mason watched from the parking lot as his former friend walked into the building, shoulders slumped, confidence shaken. The interview did not go well. Mason learned this from Lisa Chen, a secretary in the Human Resources Department who was dating one of his former co-workers. Over lunch, she mentioned that the maintenance supervisor position had been filled by an external candidate after the internal applicant had performed poorly during his interview. Poor guy looked like he hadn't slept in days, Lisa said. Kept checking his phone, couldn't focus on the questions. Really unprofessional. Mason nodded sympathetically. That's too bad. I hope he gets another chance. Oh, I'm sure he will. These things happen. But Mason knew they wouldn't just happen. He would make sure they kept happening until Cody's professional life was completely destroyed. The next phase targeted Sabrina's sense of security. Mason began leaving subtle signs that someone was watching her. He would move her car a few inches from where she parked it, rearrange items on her desk at work, send anonymous flowers to her office with no card attached. The surveillance was psychological rather than threatening. Mason wanted Sabrina to feel unsettled, paranoid, constantly looking over her shoulder. He wanted her to understand what it felt like to have someone invisible controlling aspects of your life. The flowers were particularly effective. Sabrina mentioned them to Cody during one of their recorded phone conversations, her voice tight with anxiety. Someone sent me roses today, she said. No note, no explanation. The receptionist said they were delivered by a courier who paid cash. Maybe it was a secret admirer, Cody suggested. That's what worries me. What if it's someone from the office? What if someone's been watching me? You're being paranoid. Am I? Yesterday, I could have sworn someone had been in my car. My seat was adjusted differently, and I found a coffee cup in the back that wasn't mine. Sabrina, you're stressed. You're imagining things. Maybe, but I feel like I'm being watched. Mason smiled as he listened to the recording. Sabrina's instincts were correct. She was being watched. But she had no idea who was doing it or why. The psychological pressure campaign continued for 2 weeks. Mason would follow Sabrina at a distance, making sure she caught glimpses of the same car in her rearview mirror. He would call her office and hang up when she answered. He would leave single red roses on her car windshield in different parking lots. The cumulative effect was exactly what Mason had hoped for. Sabrina became jumpy, distracted, constantly looking around for threats that might or might not be there. Her work performance suffered, and she began having arguments with Cody about her paranoia. "You're making me crazy," she told him during one recorded conversation. "You act like I'm imagining all this, but I know someone's watching me." "Who would be watching you, and why?" "I don't know. Maybe it's Mason. Maybe he's figured out about us." "Mason's depressed, not psychotic. He's barely getting out of bed, let alone conducting surveillance operations." "Then who?" "Nobody. You're stressed. You're feeling guilty about the affair, and your mind is playing tricks on you." Mason found it interesting that Cody was so quick to dismiss the possibility of surveillance. It suggested a lack of imagination and overconfidence that would work to Mason's advantage later. Meanwhile, Mason was preparing for the next phase of his plan, the systematic destruction of Jason Crow's reputation and career. Jason was the most challenging target because he was the most powerful. As a company executive, he had resources and connections that could potentially trace back to Mason if the attack was too direct. But Jason also had the most to lose, which made him vulnerable in different ways. Mason had spent weeks researching Jason's background, financial situation, and personal relationships. What he'd discovered was a pattern of ethical violations and financial improprieties that had been hidden by Jason's position and charm. Jason was embezzling company funds through inflated expense reports and fake contractor payments. He was also having affairs with multiple female employees, using his position to coerce sexual relationships in exchange for promotions and favorable treatment. Most damaging of all, Jason was involved in a kickback scheme with several major clients. He was accepting cash payments in exchange for awarding contracts to specific vendors, skimming money that should have gone to his company's bottom line. All of this information had been gathered through careful surveillance, document photography, and Linda Hayes' access to internal records. Mason now had enough evidence to destroy Jason's career and potentially send him to prison. But timing was everything. Mason needed to coordinate Jason's downfall with the destruction of Cody and Sabrina, creating a cascade of consequences that would seem natural rather than orchestrated. The opportunity came in mid-December when Jason announced he would be presenting the company's annual strategic plan to the board of directors. It was a high-profile event with significant media attention, the kind of moment where scandal would have maximum impact. Mason began by leaking information to investigative reporters at the local newspaper. He provided them with copies of Jason's fraudulent expense reports, documentation of the kickback scheme, and evidence of workplace sexual maltreatment. The reporters were experienced professionals who knew how to verify information and protect their sources. At the same time, Mason sent anonymous packages to several members of the company's board of directors. Each package contained detailed evidence of Jason's misconduct, along with a note suggesting they might want to investigate before the strategic planning presentation. The revelations began appearing in the newspaper 3 days before Jason's big presentation. The headlines were devastating. Marketing executive under investigation for fraud, sexual maltreatment allegations rock local company, kickback scheme costs shareholders millions. Jason tried to control the damage, issuing denials and claiming he was the sufferer of a disgruntled employee's vendetta. But the evidence was overwhelming, and more sufferers began coming forward as the story gained momentum. The board of directors called an emergency meeting and suspended Jason pending a full investigation. His strategic planning presentation was canceled, and he was escorted from the building by security guards while news cameras recorded his humiliation. Sabrina, as Jason's protege and rumored mistress, was caught in the fallout. She was questioned by investigators, scrutinized by reporters, and shunned by coworkers who wanted to distance themselves from the scandal. Within a week, she had been transferred to a different department and demoted to an entry-level position. Her career, which had been built on her relationship with Jason, collapsed along with his. Cody, as Sabrina's lover and a peripheral figure in the scandal, also suffered consequences. Rumors spread through the plant that he had been involved in the corruption, and his reputation was permanently damaged. Mason watched the destruction unfold from his hidden vantage point, feeling a cold satisfaction as his enemies' lives fell apart. But he wasn't done yet. The public humiliation was just the beginning. The final phase of Mason's plan involved direct confrontation. On a cold December evening, Mason sent Cody a text message from an untraceable phone. Warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Come alone. Sabrina needs your help. The message was designed to trigger Cody's protective instincts while also appealing to his ego. Mason knew his former friend well enough to predict he would respond immediately, without thinking through the potential consequences. The warehouse was an abandoned building that Mason had scouted weeks earlier. It was isolated, unmonitored, and provided the perfect setting for what he had planned. Mason arrived early and prepared the space. He set up portable lights to create dramatic shadows, positioned cameras to record the encounter, and arranged the environment to his psychological advantage. Cody arrived 20 minutes later, driving his red Chevrolet with obvious haste. He parked outside the warehouse and walked cautiously toward the entrance, calling Sabrina's name. "She's not here," Mason said, stepping out of the shadows. Cody spun around, his face showing surprise and confusion. "Mason, what are you doing here? Where's Sabrina?" "Sabrina's fine. She's at home, probably wondering why you're not answering your phone." "I don't understand. You sent me a message saying she needed help?" "I sent you a message saying you needed to be here. The part about Sabrina was just motivation." Cody's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. "What's going on, Mason? You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." Mason stepped into the light, and Cody could see how much he had changed over the past few months. The weight loss, the muscle definition, the cold intelligence in his eyes. This wasn't the same man Cody had been betraying. "You've been sleeping with my wife," Mason said simply. "What? No, For 6 months, maybe longer. You've been coming to my house, eating my food, laughing at my jokes, pretending to be my friend while you screwed my wife in my bed." Cody's face went pale. "Mason, I can explain. No explanations. I know everything. I have recordings, photographs, videos. I know about the restaurant meetings, the apartment visits, the plans you've been making behind my back. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're a liar, a betrayer, and a coward. And now you're going to pay for what you've done." Cody took a step backward. "Mason, let's talk about this. I know you're angry, but violence isn't the answer." "You're right. Violence isn't the answer. Justice is." Mason pulled out his phone and showed Cody a video, security footage from the office parking garage showing Cody and Sabrina in an intimate embrace. "This goes public tomorrow," Mason said, "along with audio recordings of your conversations, evidence of your involvement in Jason's corruption, and documentation of your pill use." "Pill use? I don't use pills. The cocaine in your bedroom says otherwise. Amazing what police can find when they get an anonymous tip about suspicious activity." Cody's eyes widened with panic. "You planted pills in my apartment. I planted consequences. You destroyed my marriage, so I'm destroying your life. Fair trade." "Mason, please. I know I screwed up, but you didn't screw up. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices to betray someone who trusted you. Now you get to live with the consequences." Cody looked around desperately as if searching for escape routes or allies, but they were alone in the warehouse, just two men facing the wreckage of a friendship. "What do you want?" Cody asked. "I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Your job, your reputation, your freedom, your dignity. I want you to experience the same humiliation you put me through. And then what? You'll forgive me? We'll be even?" Mason smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then nothing. There is no forgiveness, Cody. There's no going back to the way things were. You burned that bridge when you decided my feelings didn't matter. I never meant to hurt you. You meant to take what was mine. The hurt was just collateral damage." Mason circled Cody slowly, like a hunter sizing up prey. "Do you know what the worst part is? It's not that you slept with my wife, it's that you looked me in the eye every day and pretended to be my friend. You shook my hand, you ate at my table, you asked about my health and my happiness while you were destroying both. I was confused. The situation got complicated. The situation was simple. You wanted something that belonged to someone else, so you took it. Everything else is just Rationalization. Cody straightened up, some of his old confidence returning. Fine. You want the truth? Here it is. Sabrina was unhappy. She felt neglected, unappreciated, stuck in a boring marriage with a boring man. I gave her something you couldn't. Excitement, passion, a future worth looking forward to. Is that what you tell yourself? It's what happened. Sabrina chose me, Mason. Not because I seduced her or manipulated her, but because I offered her something better than what she had. Mason nodded slowly. You're right. She did choose you. And now I'm choosing to destroy you. You can't destroy me. I've got friends, connections, resources. You had those things, past tense. Jason's gone. Your job prospects are ruined, and your reputation is finished. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be lucky to find work washing dishes. You're bluffing. Am I? Mason showed Cody another video on his phone. This one showing Cody entering his apartment building while clearly intoxicated, stumbling and nearly falling down. Drunk driving is a serious offense, Mason said, especially when you're already under investigation for pill possession. Add in the workplace maltreatment allegations and the connection to Jason's corruption, and you're looking at serious jail time. Those are all lies. Some of them, but lies can be very convincing when they're properly presented, and I've had months to prepare the presentation. Cody lunged forward, trying to grab Mason's phone, but Mason was ready. 2 months of boxing training had restored reflexes that had been dormant for years, and he easily sidestepped Cody's clumsy attack. The fight that followed was brief and decisive. Cody had never been much of a physical presence. His strengths were charm and manipulation, not combat. Mason, on the other hand, had been preparing for this moment for months. He systematically dismantled Cody's defenses, landing precise punches that sapped his opponent's strength without causing permanent damage. It wasn't a brutal knocking, it was a methodical demonstration of dominance. When Cody finally collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily and bleeding from his nose, Mason stood over him like a judge delivering a verdict. This is how it ends, Mason said. Not with you riding off into the sunset with my wife, but with you crawling around in the dirt, understanding exactly how powerless you really are. Please, Cody gasped. I'll leave town. I'll never see Sabrina again. Just don't release those videos. Too late for bargaining. The wheels are already in motion. Mason pulled out a small video camera and began recording. Say your name. What? Say your name, for the camera. I'm not doing anything for your sick game. Mason kicked Cody in the ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make a point. Say your name. Cody Walsh, Cody said reluctantly. Good. Now tell the camera what you did to my marriage. Go to hell. Another kick, this one to the shoulder. Tell the camera what you did. I had an affair with your wife. And I lied to you about it. How long? 6 months. Say you're sorry. I'm sorry. Louder. I'm sorry. Sorry for what? Sorry for sleeping with your wife. Sorry for lying to you. Sorry for being a terrible friend. Mason stopped recording. Good. That'll make a nice addition to my collection. He walked toward the warehouse exit, leaving Cody on his knees in the pool of light. At the doorway, he turned back. Don't try to leave town, Cody. Don't try to contact Sabrina. Don't try to salvage your reputation or your career. Just accept that your old life is over and try to build something new from the pieces. What about Sabrina? What are you going to do to her? Mason smiled. Sabrina gets to live with her choices. That's punishment enough. The next morning, Mason returned home for the first time in 2 months. Sabrina was in the kitchen making coffee, still wearing her pajamas. She looked up when he walked in, her face showing surprise and concern. Mason, where have you been? I've been worried sick. I've been away, he said simply. Away where? You just disappeared. I called your phone. I checked with your friends. I even filed a missing person report with the police. I needed time to think. About what? Mason sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where they'd planned their future, where they'd pretended to be happy. About us, he said. About our marriage. About what comes next. Sabrina sat down across from him, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. And what did you decide? I decided that I know about Cody. The words hung in the air between them. Sabrina's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, denial, guilt, and finally resignation. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough? Are you going to ask me to explain? Would it matter? Sabrina shook her head. Probably not. They sat in silence for several minutes, two people who had once loved each other trying to figure out how to say goodbye. "I'm not going to fight you on the divorce," Sabrina said eventually. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything." "No, you don't." "Will you tell me one thing? Did you love me, ever?" Mason considered the question. "I loved the person I thought you were. But that person was a fiction, wasn't it? A character you created to get what you wanted." "That's not fair." "Neither was lying to me for 6 months." Sabrina nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you pack your things and leave. The house is mine, the car is mine, the bank accounts are mine. You get to start over with nothing, just like you left me with nothing." "Mason, I need somewhere to go. I need time to find a place." "You should have thought of that before you decided to destroy our marriage. Please, 1 week. Just give me 1 week to figure things out." Mason looked at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt nothing. No love, no hate, no pity, just a cold emptiness where his feelings used to be. "3 days," he said. "Then I never want to see you again." Sabrina nodded and went upstairs to pack. Mason could hear her moving around in their bedroom, opening drawers and closets, gathering the remnants of her life. He walked through the house, noting how different it felt now that he knew the truth. The garage where Cody had built those shelves, the couch where Mason had sat while his wife called her lover, the bedroom where they had shared their lies along with their bed. Tomorrow he would start the process of erasing every trace of both Sabrina and Cody from his life. He would redecorate, rearrange, rebuild. But tonight he just wanted to sit in his kitchen and listen to the sound of his marriage ending. 3 days later, Sabrina was gone. She left a note on the kitchen counter, a brief apology and a forwarding address for legal papers. Mason read it once, then threw it away. The divorce proceedings were swift and uncontested. Mason's lawyer, armed with extensive evidence of Sabrina's infidelity, negotiated a settlement that left her with almost nothing. She would get no alimony, no property, no claim to Mason's pension or retirement accounts. Cody, meanwhile, was dealing with his own legal troubles. The planted cocaine had been discovered during a police search related to the maltreatment allegations. Combined with his connection to Jason's corruption scandal, it was enough to result in criminal charges. He was arrested on a Friday afternoon, just as he was leaving his apartment to meet with a lawyer about the workplace maltreatment case. The local news covered the story, showing footage of Cody being led away in handcuffs. Mason watched the coverage from his living room, feeling the same cold satisfaction he'd experienced throughout his campaign of revenge. Justice wasn't pretty, but it was effective. Jason Crow's downfall was even more spectacular. The investigation into his financial crimes had expanded to include federal authorities, and he was facing charges that could result in decades in prison. His wife had filed for divorce, his assets had been frozen, and his reputation was permanently destroyed. All three of his primary targets had been neutralized, their lives dismantled with the same systematic precision they had used to destroy his marriage. But Mason found that revenge was an oddly hollow victory. He had achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish, yet he felt no sense of satisfaction or closure. The pain of betrayal hadn't diminished. It had simply been joined by a different kind of emptiness. On a cold February evening, 3 months after his confrontation with Cody, Mason was sitting in his living room when someone knocked on his door. He wasn't expecting visitors. He'd cut ties with most of his former social circle and had no interest in making new friends. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in her 30s with blonde hair and tired eyes. She was holding a suitcase. "Can I help you?" he asked through the door. "My name is Kelly Walsh," she said. "I think you knew my ex-husband." Mason opened the door. "Cody's ex-wife." "That's right. We divorced 2 years ago, but I've been following his recent troubles. I saw what happened to him, and I have a pretty good idea who was responsible. I don't know what you're talking about." Kelly smiled. "Mr. Reed, I spent 5 years married to Cody Walsh. I know exactly what kind of man he is, and I know what he's capable of doing to people who trust him. I also know what it feels like to want revenge." Mason studied her face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agendas. What he saw was intelligence, determination, and a familiar kind of emptiness. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to offer you a partnership. You've proven you're very good at destroying people who deserve it. I have some people in my life who need destroying. I'm not in the revenge business. Aren't you? Because from where I'm standing, you seem to have quite a talent for it." Mason considered her proposal. He had accomplished his original mission, but the skills and resources he'd developed in the process were still intact. And he had to admit, There was something appealing about having a purpose again. "Who did you have in mind?" he asked. Kelly's smile grew wider. "My ex-husband's new girlfriend, the woman he left me for. She thinks she's won some kind of prize, but I think she deserves to understand exactly what kind of man she's chosen." "And Cody?" "Cody's going to prison. That's punishment enough for him. But the woman who helped him destroy my marriage, she deserves a more personal touch." Mason opened the door wider. "Come in, let's talk." As Kelly entered his house, Mason felt something stir inside him that he hadn't experienced in months. A sense of anticipation, of purpose. Revenge might be a hollow victory, but it was better than no victory at all. And perhaps, with the right partner, it might be possible to find something approaching satisfaction in the careful, methodical destruction of people who thought they could take whatever they wanted without consequences. The winter wind howled outside as Mason closed the door behind his unexpected visitor. In the distance, he could hear the sound of traffic on the interstate, people going somewhere, pursuing their own dreams and schemes and betrayals. But inside the house, two damaged people sat down to plan the next chapter of their war against those who had wronged them. Mason Reed had discovered something about himself during his campaign against Cody and Sabrina. He was very good at revenge, and now he had found someone who appreciated that particular skill set. The game was beginning again,